Hello friends, welcome back to CTRL+S. This series is a behind-the-scenes look at how I've set up and run my high school graphic design program. In episode 3, we talked through day 2, including the bigger picture about how my 3 classes kind of work together. That's digital design and illustration, visual communications, and the advanced and honors graphic design class. So today, we'll be planning for day 3, the last day of the first week of school. So the goal for today is to keep things rolling just enough so that students feel like they're getting started for real, and but we're still learning routines. We're still helping them get comfortable with what the class is about and how the class works, and we're starting to shift out of the setup mode and into actually getting some work done. So just a quick reminder, this is all pre-semester planning. School has not even started yet. So what I'm doing is we're walking through what I plan to do once school begins at the end of August. We still have a couple of weeks at this moment. For digital design and illustration, this is going to be our final setup day before we actually dive into the Adobe Illustrator tutorials that I have planned for next week. So we have to cover some of the fundamentals, which are highly important before I let them move on, but we'll most likely be covering it throughout the year at random times. But today what we're going to be covering is the topic of file formats. We'll talk about the JPEGs versus GIF. I'll talk about what is a PNG, PSD, PDF, TIF, EPS. They need to know which ones are vector, which ones are high resolution, and which ones are lossy. So that's highly important to go over. And then we'll talk about resolution. That's print versus screen, and 300 versus 72 DPI. We also will talk about vector versus raster. They have to understand the difference between those two. And then, for their projects, they're going to need image resources, and I don't like them just to go out and search on Google. I would rather they not do that. So I give them 2 websites to utilize. There may be more out there, but I like them to use pexels.com and unsplash.com. Both of these are sites that have lots and lots of really high definition pictures, very good pictures for our purpose. And then what I'll do is I'll take a step back. We'll just look around the room, and I'll do a room tour for them. I'll show them where they can find all of the tools, talk about the equipment, how to use the printer, where do they get the scissors, the pencil sharpener, and all that stuff. I'll just point it all out, and I want to just iterate to them or reiterate to them how important it is for them to feel comfortable in the classroom. This is their space. Everything in it is for them, and they don't necessarily have to raise their hand to get up and go get stuff. If they need a pencil, if they need a ruler, just get up, go get it. It's your space. And then after that, if there's time, we'll do something that we're going to be doing throughout the year, which is critiquing work that I have in the room. So we'll critique either logos or a package design or one of the brochures from my brochure rack back here. And I like to go to hotels and keep this thing stocked with current brochures as much as possible, and use them to help train my students to understand how to talk about and how to break down and critique works of design. Then after all that, I will bring up Adobe Illustrator on my machine, and I'll do a demo of Pen Tool exercise number 1, which is the first tutorial that they will be doing when we come back from this weekend. So just a quick note before I get into the visual communications plan for this day. I need to acknowledge that I made a mistake in the last episode. I repeated the day 1 material for day 2, and I really want to clarify my plan for day 1, day 2, and day 3, which I'll get into as well. So just to clarify, for day 1 on Tuesday, we will start with bell work, and that's a question of what do you think visual communications actually means? And then once we're done with that, we'll get into the syllabus. We'll talk about the expectations for the class. We'll do an overview of the art history projects that will occur 4 times throughout the school year. And then I'll introduce them to the very first assignment of the year, which is a art history project, Bauhaus trading card design. And I'm actually looking forward to that. It's going to be a fun one. And then we'll watch a short Bauhaus introductory video, and I'll have them do a writing prompt to find out where their knowledge is at. We'll ask them questions like, what do you already know about Bauhaus? What stands out to you visually about the style? And how does this feel different from modern design? And so that is day 1. For day 2, it's a lot more simple. There's going to be a lot more of an opportunity for them to dive into the first stage of their trading card project. But I want to start with group discussion. We'll talk about the Bauhaus movement once again, get their head back into that, that movement, and we'll critique some Bauhaus works. We'll talk about the visual decisions that were made to create those works. And then, like I said, I'll have them jump right back into the mood boarding. Just do research as much as you can. Find visuals, find colors, find typography, find anything that can help you to give you inspiration for this Bauhaus trading card project. And that brings us to Thursday, which is when I think what we need to do is take a step back and just make sure that before we get further into the school year, that we're all on the same page, that they remember things from last year, such as color theory, typography, and things like that. So at the beginning of this class on Thursday, I'm going to have a refresher of discussion with them about color theory, font classifications, and other typographic topics. And then I'll have them dive right back into their research, spend the period just focused on building that mood board, maybe doing some sketching. And toward the last 10 minutes of class, I will have a pop quiz. I want to just find out what they remembered about color theory and typography. So it'll be a short one. It'll be ungraded, but I think it's necessary just to make sure before they get into next week that we are all on the same page. In Advanced and Honors Graphic Design class, also known as the Design Rescue Studio, on this day, I want to introduce everyone to the flow and the structure of that we'll be using throughout the year for all client work and project development. And so what I'll do is I'll gather everyone into a big circle as much as possible, get into like a conference room kind of setting, and because we've got serious things to discuss. So I'll pose the question, what do they think the workflow should look like in Design Rescue? And we'll get an idea of where their head is at, find out if they understand everything, and then of course, I'll let them know my expectations for how I think that things should actually work. And then we'll take some time, we'll look at some projects from Design Rescue last year, and we'll talk about those assignments, or those projects, I should say. And then the conversation will turn to the pop-up shop, and we will discuss merchandising and branding and things like that. And then what I want to do is have them get into small groups, and I'll do a writing or a sketching prompt, depending on what they want to do. They can write or sketch, but it's if you had to design one thing to sell on campus this fall, what would it be? That way I can start the whole process of them thinking about, what can we do this year to have a successful pop-up shop? And after that, I'll have them share their ideas. It's all informal because we're going to dive into this in a much deeper way next week for sure. So each class will absolutely take on a slightly different trajectory from the other classes, and you'll find the need to deal with students differently, obviously, from class to class. Some students will be fully engaged right from the very beginning, while others may need a little bit of adjusting to the project-based kind of nature of these classes. especially in digital design. You'd be surprised how many students show up and not expect the class to be as creative as it is, and so, or even connected to real world, jobs, out there in the creative industry. So part of my job this week has been, and next week will be, to help them understand what is possible with the skills that we're learning and the careers that are available to them in this industry. On the next episode of Control+S, we're going to be planning for week 2. In digital design and illustration, we'll be talking about the Adobe Illustrator pen tool projects. In visual communications, they're going to get right back into the trading card project that they're designing. And in the Advanced and Honors graphic design class, we're going to get more into a discussion about studio dynamics, and we'll get further into our creation of the brand for their pop-up shop. Thank you once again for joining me on Control+S. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm not just a graphic designer and a high school teacher, I am also an author. I wrote a book called The Dragon Codex, Quest for the Relics of Design. This is a great story about 3 young dragons who have to learn graphic design to save the world from creative destruction. It's a book for young adults, and it's a story about family, it's a story about friendships, and a story about finding your place in the world. Pick up a copy today. I know you'll love it.